Hey guys, tonight we're drifting back to the golden dunes and incense-sweetened air of 14th century Mali, into the glittering court of none other than Mansa Musa himself. But no, you're not the emperor, not even close. You're the tired, overworked accountant who keeps his mountain of gold from toppling into chaos. By dawn, you'll have counted cow hooves as currency, gotten bribed with sandalwood, argued with a foreign mathematician, and nearly lost your head over a missing coin. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sound that wakes you isn't a gong, a bird call, or a servant's whisper. It's the dry, rhythmic brush of woven sandals on polished sandstone, servants sweeping the royal hallways clean before first light. That, and the scratchy flap of bat wings overhead. You blink awake on your straw mat, limbs heavy, air still cool, body stiff from last night's ledgers. The gold tally in your dreams didn't balance either. The palace is asleep, but not for long. Somewhere beyond your curtained alcove, the incense bearers are already lighting the morning braziers. You can smell cloves and burned frankincense floating in. You take a breath and roll your shoulders with a sigh. Time to begin another day of not getting executed over math errors. You swing your legs down, touching the smooth, dusty floor. Your room is small, half-walled with dried mud brick and painted with faded geometric murals, remnants from some long-ago renovation under Mansa Musa's grandfather. A tiny carved shelf above your head holds a tooth-cleaning stick, a lump of henna soap, and your lucky quartz pebble. You gave it a name last year, Balanced Ledger. You whisper good morning to it. No one can say you're not consistent. You hear the water-bearer sloshing past the corridor and step out with a sleepy grunt. He tilts a gourd into your palms, and you rinse your face 3 times, more from tradition than cleanliness. The water's been perfumed with dried rose petals. You resist the urge to taste it. It's still dim as you step outside into the courtyard. The stones beneath your feet are cool and smooth. You make your way toward the small shrine under the baobab tree, where a servant waits with your morning sunscreen. Not the modern kind, of course. This one's a fragrant paste made from mashed shea butter, fine white clay, and, yes, crocodile dung. It's supposed to ward off sunburn, bad dreams, and financial curses. You smear it on anyway. Somewhere nearby, you hear a rooster absolutely losing his mind. Probably angry about taxes. You return to your room, wrap yourself in your striped kaftan, faded but clean, and tuck the silver tally stick into your waistband. Then it's back out into the hallway, where the palace starts to hum awake. Distant talking. The clack of dishes. Sandal soles everywhere. You pass a pair of junior accountants, both younger than you, both pretending they weren't just scribbling poetry in the margins of a tax scroll. You give them a nod. They scurry like mice. The sun finally crests the eastern wall as you reach the outer colonnade, where you eat your breakfast in half-shadow. Roasted yam, fermented milk, and a date stuffed with peanuts, simple, grounding food. A scribe near you mutters something about the Sultan's war elephants being weighed again. You're not sure if it's metaphorical. Someone else mentions a caravan of salt getting intercepted near Wallata. Another sighs and says the Portuguese are sending letters again. Probably asking for gold samples. You sip from your calabash and close your eyes for a moment. The weight of the day ahead looms large, and not metaphorically. It's your job, your sacred, absolutely unappreciated job, to manage and balance Mansa Musa's palace accounts. That means weighing coin purses, measuring dust, counting imported cloth bolts, calculating tariffs, and making sure no camel goes untaxed. One misrecorded bag of gold dust, and your neck might be decorating a spear outside the grain hall. No pressure. There's a story passed around among the accountants about the last guy who miscounted tribute from the copper mines. Historians still argue whether he was sent to a salt pit or turned into salt himself. You hope it's just a cautionary tale. You rise, brush the yam crumbs from your lap, and head toward the ledger room. The sun's warm now. Your arms are sweaty beneath your kaftan, and the crocodile paste is starting to itch. Perfect start. But still, you have your rituals. Your little pebble. Your fingers that know the feel of real gold from plated brass. And a good instinct for when someone's hiding coins in their sandal. You'll need all of that today. You hear the palace drums begin their low, steady rhythm behind you. The day has officially begun. You whisper a quick prayer that your ink doesn't run, your scales stay balanced, and nobody's ox dies in your columns. The corridor ahead glows with sunlit dust. You step forward, tally stick ready, into the golden math storm of Imperial Fina. You reach the door of the ledger room just as two sleepy guards swing it open. They barely nod, the whites of their eyes yellowed with dust and boredom. One of them is chewing something that smells vaguely like fermented onion. You make a mental note to breathe through your mouth. Inside, the room is half lit by slits in the thick mud brick walls. You don't trust sunlight for official counting, it shifts too easily. You reach for the oil lamp and strike the flint twice. The flame sputters alive, casting your curled shadow across the wall. You take a moment to center yourself. This is your temple, your war zone, and your grave if you mess it up. Wooden shelves line the room, stacked with scrolls, pebbled wax tablets, and folded ledgers sewn together with date palm thread. In the far corner, a wooden chest reinforced with bronze strips holds back up gold scales. 3 different sets, each slightly off from the other, depending on who's doing the weighing. You always use set B, slightly heavier. Safer that way. You move to your stone slab desk. The tally sheet from yesterday is still there, folded once and slightly smudged. You run your fingers over the numbers, testing the ink. It held. You mutter the columns under your breath: imports, exports, livestock taxes, cloth weights, incidentals. You notice someone's added a little note: 2 silver coins deducted for embassy fireworks. You blink. Fireworks? You sigh. Probably again. A junior clerk shuffles in with your ink bowl and a fresh reed pen. His robe's too long and he nearly trips. You thank him with a nod, and he vanishes. Like most junior clerks, he fears that simply watching you work might make numbers leak out of his ears. The first task of the day, recalibrating the credit scrolls from Timbuktu. You unravel one carefully, squinting at the scribe's tight Sahelian script. He writes like he's afraid of running out of papyrus. You decode half of it, mostly trade in camel tack, ivory dice, and salt bars. Then you hit the questionable line: received 9 bolts indigo cloth, taxed for bolts accordingly. Wait. That can't be right. The cloth tax is supposed to be 1/5, not nearly half. Either someone's skimming, or someone's bad at fractions. Possibly both. You make a note in your side column: recalculate indigo levi, inspect shipment manifests. You draw a small fish symbol next to it. A quiet warning. Moments later, another accountant rushes in, face flushed. It's Bacco, the grain tax record keeper. He's breathing hard, holding a scroll with both hands like it's made of glass. They're saying bakery miscounted the tribute grain from GAO, he blurts. You blink. Bakery? The guy who alphabetizes his reed pens? They say he logged 10 sacks short. The auditor from the court found it this morning. You close your eyes briefly. 10 sacks in a court this size could feed 3 noble families for a week, or fill a few belly-fat pigeons if sold under the table. Where is he now, you ask? Confessing to the palace imam, Bacco mutters. He's begging them to believe it was mice. You resist a groan. Historians still argue whether actual mice could chew through grain sacks quickly enough to cause these sorts of shortages, or whether mice just means someone got bribed with sweet wine. The tension in the room thickens. A scribe peeks in, then ducks out again. You glance toward the high slit in the wall, where sunlight now drapes like gold cloth across the scroll shelf. You rise. This may be the first of many fires today. You roll your shoulders, scribble a quick prayer on the margin of your page, and turn to the corner cabinet where the auditor scroll is kept, containing names of suspected manipulators, corrupted tariffs, and scribes who mysteriously lost their accounting tables during sandstorms. There's something comforting about the process, brutal, yes, but predictable. If the scroll glows red with complaints beside your name, you're dead. If it's clean, you live to count again tomorrow. You aren't on the scroll. Yet. Outside, the palace drums slow for the mid-morning pause. You move to the long counter where a tray of gold dust sits under a cloth. It's destined for today's diplomatic transfer, a minor Saharan chief who's come to grovel before Mansa Musa's cousin. You lift the cloth. The dust glows faintly in the filtered light. It's fine, smooth, and slightly warm, real stuff. You can smell it. Metallic, ancient. You scoop it gently into the weighing pan, adjust the counterweights, and stare at the needle. It hovers, off. By 1 grain. Just 1. You freeze. Recheck. It's not your mistake. Someone skimmed. You glance over your shoulder, then mark the tray with a green wax seal. Green means reweigh with witness. You slide it to the side, and nobody's the wiser. Yet. This is why your beard is graying early. This is why you talk in your sleep. This is why you've developed a mysterious twitch in your left eyebrow whenever someone mentions grain audits. Your ink has started to dry. You reach for the inkwell, dip your pen again, and feel the rhythm return. Outside, the palace heat builds. The crocodile dung sunscreen is beginning to crust. You resist scratching your temple. You steady your breath. It's only mid-morning. You've already avoided 1 trap, uncovered a second, and possibly saved your fellow accountant from being boiled alive in millet. If you survive until dinner, it'll be a miracle. The sun climbs higher, slicing through the ledger room slits in jagged shafts of gold. You're sweating now, not from guilt, of course, but from the steady thrum of responsibility. Your kaftan clings uncomfortably to your back, the wax tablets on your desk beginning to soften at the edges. Outside, the sound of clinking dishes and low voices signals breakfast for the rest of the palace. You stretch, spine cracking softly like dry papyrus, and slip out into the west colonnade, where the palace's tiled shadows offer fleeting relief. This is your favorite walk of the day. Not because it's peaceful, far from it, but because here, among the high arches and wind-cooled columns, you eavesdrop on the empire. You pass 2 camel handlers arguing about whether salt loads or copper bricks are harder on the beast's joints. One says copper shifts weight unexpectedly on turns. The other claims salt sweats and burns through saddlebags. Neither of them notices you. You're invisible when you want to be. That's a valuable skill for someone who overhears sensitive things. You settle on a stone bench half in sun, half in shade. Your breakfast arrives on a small carved tray carried by a palace boy, barely old enough to lift the thing. He places it gently beside you, mashed yam with a sprinkle of dry fish, thick millet porridge, and a dish of honeyed almonds reserved for senior record keepers. Perks of the job. You eat slowly, chewing until the starch sticks between your teeth, washing it down with cool water from a gourd wrapped in damp cloth. Across the courtyard, a storyteller is regaling two visiting merchants with tales of a talking crocodile that used to work security for the treasury. You snort softly. That tale's older than the painted murals in the Sultan's second library. Still, stories like that travel faster than gold caravans. One of the merchants leans forward, clearly buying every word. The other is busy scratching at a suspiciously swollen ankle. Fleas, probably. You make a mental note not to touch any imported rugs this week. The breeze picks up slightly, carrying with it the scent of roasted barley and sandalwood ash. Somewhere close, women sing in the textile courtyard, beating dyed cloth against stones in rhythmic intervals. The sound is soothing, almost hypnotic. You let your shoulders drop for a moment. Then, laughter. Loud, brash, unmistakably high-ranking. You glance toward the northern archway and spot him, Turek, the copper tax officer, striding across the court with his sandals flapping like angry books. He's surrounded by two scribes and an unfortunate servant dragging a sealed trunk. Turek always eats late and talks loud, two things that irritate you more than they should. He waves when he sees you and veers off course toward your bench. "Ah, the Sultan's favorite number minder," he booms, sitting without asking and flicking a honeyed almond into his mouth. "Still haven't collapsed under the weight of all that gold, eh?" You smile politely. "Not yet. But I'm working on it." He chuckles, spraying crumbs. You resist the urge to scoot farther away. "You hear about bakery?" he asks. "I heard the mice story. Real tragic. And very original. The palace cats are furious." You smirk. "Historians will debate that detail for centuries." He laughs again, louder. A peacock screeches from a balcony above, offended. Turek drums his fingers on your bench. "Anyway, rumor is Musa's elephant master is requesting double funding this month. Says two of the beasts are showing signs of divine dreaming. Whatever that means." You raise an eyebrow. "I thought one of them was already assigned to the prophet procession." He wants extra salt allowance too. Elephants sweat. Apparently, blessed ones sweat more. You sigh and make a mental note. Elephant dreams. Extra salt. Possible inflation risk if this turns into a trend. Turek rises with a grunt, grabs another almond, and claps you on the back. "Don't work too hard. We all know you'll outlive us, miser that you are." You force a smile as he strolls off toward the diplomat's quarters. The bench feels warmer now. You finish your meal in silence, chewing each bite with slow intention. Your job requires clarity, digestion, and a strong stomach. You rise, brush off your kaftan, and carry your dish back yourself. Not because you must, but because it keeps your legs moving, and your mind clear. Palace life doesn't reward stillness unless you're the one sitting on a throne. As you round the corner, you overhear another interesting exchange, two traders from GAO, bickering over spice weights and whether or not one of them declared their saffron correctly at the tax gate. One mentions bribing a junior scribe. The other swears he saw the gold vanish into a robe sleeve. You file that away for later. You pass a silk-curtained room and catch a glimpse of one of the princesses being fanned by two maids while another applies coal in slow, ceremonial strokes. You walk faster. The fewer royal glances you catch, the fewer explanations you'll need to give. By the time you return to the ledger wing, the sun is blazing, the walkways shimmering like heated brass. You pause at the fountain for a splash of water across your neck, and offer a brief, whispered complaint to whatever ancestors are still willing to listen. You're barely halfway through your day. The weight of numbers, names, debts, and whispered bribes is only starting to gather like storm clouds behind your eyes. Still, you made it through breakfast without being summoned or sentenced. That's a win. You step into the shade of the palace archway again, your shadow falling long and narrow behind you. A day in this job may seem boring to outsiders, but you know better. Every meal, every merchant, every misplaced almond, everything has a number, and every number has a consequence. You roll your shoulders once more, count quietly to 10 under your breath, and make your way toward the archive doors. The archive doors groan slightly as you push them open, the sound long and wooden, like a tired camel complaining. Inside, it smells of ink, beeswax, dried scroll glue, and a hint of old sweat, a scent you've learned to associate with job security. The light is dim again, but you know the layout by heart: left wall for salt taxes, right wall for copper and ivory, central table for current audits, and the locked back cabinet for anything requiring the Sultan's seal. Today, your task is pure arithmetic survival, balancing the gold ledgers for the imperial coffers. These aren't just any ledgers, these are the scrolls that track the kingdom's real blood, dust, coin, and bullion. You crack your knuckles, then unroll the thick leather-bound master scroll, the ink slightly tacky from last night's humidity. You pause for a moment and whisper your usual invocation to the ancestors of balanced columns. No one laughs anymore. Not after last year, when 3 accountants passed out after forgetting to adjust for grain barrel shrinkage over time. That math broke men. You've never looked at millet the same way. The numbers start to blur almost immediately. You blink, refocus. The ink symbols are as familiar as your own handwriting, because most of it is your own handwriting. Each entry tells a story. This caravan brought in 3,210 dinars worth of gold, paid in woven cloth and scented resin. That tax collector underreported livestock tributes by 40 head. You caught him. He never came back from probation. Some say he took a post on the edge of the desert. Others claim he's teaching arithmetic to donkeys. The truth? You stopped asking. You adjust your weights and begin comparing inventory against reported income. The math must balance, or you'll be questioned by the Treasury Imam himself. He smells lies like cinnamon in tea, warm and comforting until the scald hits. You spot a line error halfway down the first page. It's tiny, just a half-grain discrepancy in gold dust totals from the Wallata tribute. Easy to miss, easy to dismiss, except it's your job to never do either. You flag it with red ink. Red is expensive, which is why using it feels righteous. Behind you, one of the paper clerks sneezes, nearly toppling a stack of wax tablets. You hear a muffled apology, then the sound of someone fleeing. Probably Tand, the new hire from the textile quarter. He has nice handwriting but folds under pressure like wet papyrus. You return to the table and double-check your tallies, tapping the abacus slowly. You love this part, in a weird way. The quiet focus, the power of matching reality to ink, the tiny thrill of catching a digit out of place. Here, you are the only one standing between empire and entropy. That's when a shadow falls across your desk. You look up. It's Harun, the Sultan's personal ledger courier. That's never a good sign. Accountant, he says in his smooth voice, the palace diplomat requests a transfer ledger. The Saharan envoy will receive his pouch at third drum. You sigh, reach into the side drawer, and pull out the relevant form. It's not finalized, you say carefully. There's a 1-grain discrepancy. I marked it for reweighing. Harun raises a sculpted brow. Then the gold must be reweighed before third drum. Or the diplomat will be inconvenienced. You nod once. Nothing more to say. This is why you wear simple sandals. Easier to sprint in. You gather the tray and the green-sealed gold pouch, and follow Harun across the sunlit courtyard toward the diplomat's weighing station. There, under a narrow canvas canopy, The air smells like roasted goat and foreign perfumes. The diplomat scribe glares at your approach like you've personally delayed the empire. You set the tray on the calibrated weighing table, gently remove the pouch, and begin the reweigh. The needle dips, then settles. Still off by a grain. You reach for the backup weights, set B, and place your verification stone on the scale. Perfect balance. You raise your eyes toward the diplomat scribe, who remains impressively neutral. This is now verified, you say softly. With the heavier calibration. Green seal upheld. The scribe nods once and takes the pouch. As you leave, Orun murmurs, "You're lucky the envoy doesn't weigh it himself." You don't reply. You're always lucky, until you aren't. Back at the ledger room, you log the transaction. You add a small mark in your personal notebook, diplomatic transfer number 318, 1 grain flagged, set B verified. Later, when someone asks if there was ever a miscount in this period, you'll have that note. You close the scroll, stretch your fingers, and rub your temples. It's almost noon, and your brain feels like boiled cassava. You haven't made a single actual mistake today. Yet your body acts like you've been dodging spears. That's the life of a palace accountant. One tiny slip, one smudged figure, one shortcut, and you're breathing through a hole in the desert. Historians still argue whether a former scribe once tried to fake an entire salt caravan in the ledgers. Some say he built false crates out of carved limestone and goat hair. Others believe he simply got lucky for years, until he didn't. You personally believe he existed. You've seen the kind of desperation that makes men carve 1,000 goats into a single line of zeros. You lean back for a moment, let your eyes rest on the painted ceiling beams above, the only decoration in this otherwise dull room. They are faded now, chipped with years of hot breath and oil smoke, but they still show waves, fish, a desert sun, and what may or may not be a bird sneezing. You smile faintly. You'll survive this scroll. You'll balance the day. But first, you need lunch. And maybe a brief, blessed moment without numbers floating behind your eyelids. You leave the ledger room with your mind buzzing and your fingers stained with ink, heading toward the side corridor where the audit clerks gather. The hallway is narrow and shaded, lined with worn clay bricks and finger-wigged cracks that let tiny blades of sunlight through. You can hear muttering already. The air here always smells faintly of boiled parchment and sour dates, a combination you've come to associate with arguments and quiet dread. As you round the final corner, the tension becomes tangible. A group of scribes stand in a tight semicircle around a seated figure, Bakery. His normally pristine robes are rumpled, and his shoulders droop like palm fronds after a sandstorm. A folded scroll rests on his lap like a sentence waiting to be unrolled. A robed official, one of the audit envoys from Timbuktu, clears his throat dramatically. The error was in the tribute columns, he says, addressing no one and everyone. 10 sacks miscounted. An entire decimal column shifted. The weight doesn't match the record. Bakery looks up at you, eyes wide and red-rimmed. You've seen that look before. It's the same one you had 3 years ago when you accidentally counted the same stack of brass rings twice and added an extra 1,000 dinars to a coastal shipment. You speak gently. Show me. He hands you the scroll. You scan the lines quickly, grain tribute, page 2, subcolumn 4. There it is. His column headers were misaligned by 1 space. The tax weight applied to the wrong set of sacks. 10 bags taxed instead of 20. The kind of mistake no scribe should ever make, but also the kind that happens to anyone after too many nights spent squinting at fading ink in lantern light. You glance at the Timbuktu envoy, who raises one eyebrow and taps his toe. Shall we consider this gross negligence or mere incompetence? He asks dryly. Historians still argue whether tax errors like this were always punished, you say, mostly to yourself. Or whether they depended on whether the Sultan had a good breakfast. Nobody laughs. You clear your throat. I'll review the line. If the total amount owed has since been collected through other tariffs, the discrepancy may be purely visual. The envoy frowns. A mistake is a mistake. Yes, you agree. But execution tends to be overkill for visual mistakes. He opens his mouth to object, then shrugs and waves you off. Fine. Fix it by evening. If not, the decision returns to the treasury. Bakery exhales like he's just come up from underwater. You fold the scroll gently and hand it back. Don't sleep with ink on your hands, you whisper. That's when the digits start crawling into your dreams. He nods, eyes still glassy. You retreat from the group, already thinking about how to cross-reference this tribute amount with the seaport trade values. If you can prove the surplus came in later that month, Bakery walks. If not, he might be reassigned. Or removed. The walls of the corridor seem narrower as you walk. Heat settles on your shoulders like a sandbag. You stop briefly in the shade of an arch, lean your forehead against the cool brick, and take a breath. It's not just numbers and ink. It's lives. Futures. Meals. Names you've memorized that could vanish off payroll if you don't catch a decimal slipping out of line. You're not counting coins. You're trying to hold a vast empire together using only your brain and a pen sharpened by stress. Back in the audit room, you see another scribe scrubbing ink off a wax tablet with a rough palm leaf. He's muttering prayers. You consider joining him, then decide against it. You've got a better form of prayer, rechecking the numbers. You gather your own ledger from the side shelf, flip to your notes, and begin cross-checking Bakery's tribute error against trade flows from Jen that same week. If there was an increase in salt weights or cloth shipments, the missing value might have been absorbed without notice. After 20 minutes, you find it, a one-time overpayment logged by a northern trader bringing in crushed indigo. The value matches almost exactly. You note it in red ink, seal it with your signet, and send a junior scribe running to the palace audit tent. Bakery's day is saved. You rub your eyes, close the scroll, and lean back against the wall. You think about lunch. Or rather, about how many people have skipped theirs while figuring out whether or not a cow counts as 1 unit or 0.75 depending on whether it's sick. Voices echo through the corridor. You recognize the tone, a merchant voice, loud and defensive. You drift closer to the source. I paid the tariff in full. The tax slip was swallowed by the courier's goat. That's not my fault. You pause. Goat excuses are common. Too common. You round the corner and spot the argument, a merchant draped in bright imported cotton, shouting at one of the copper tax clerks. A scroll is indeed partially chewed in his hand. You step in before the scribe can explode. Let me see it, you say. The merchant hands it over with wide eyes. The goat was very aggressive. You examine the chew marks. The edges are soft and torn in just the wrong spots. Clever. You'd bet a handful of dinars he did it himself. You hum quietly. The goat's teeth are remarkably symmetrical. He blinks. It, trained with the best. You raise an eyebrow and hand the scroll back. I'll confirm your claim with the livestock registry. If your goat exists and is tax trained, I'll waive the penalty. He nods, sweat forming at his brow. You know he'll disappear before you reach the registry. Your tray of millet dumplings arrives, finally. You take one, chew slowly, and stare at the gold ink column awaiting your next entry. You take your time with the dumplings, chewing until they dissolve into paste. The millet is dense, faintly nutty, and slightly overcooked, just the way the palace kitchen prefers it. Probably deliberate. A sluggish stomach is easier to rule. You drink the rest of the tamarind water from your clay cup, savoring the sour sweetness on your tongue. For one brief, blessed moment, you let the silence stretch. Then, of course, it ends. A knock at your office partition, 3 short taps, 1 long. You groan softly. That's the rhythm of Dibbo, the records courier from the outer provinces. His boots are always muddy. His messages always inconvenient. Sure enough, when you unlatch the wooden door, he's there, grinning like a man who's definitely brought you trouble wrapped in papyrus. New shipment logs, he says brightly, offering a tightly wound scroll wrapped in goat hide. From the southern mines. You gonna love this one. You sigh and take it. You stay for tea, you say, mostly out of politeness. He shakes his head. Too much dust. My tongue already feels like I chewed rope. He leaves with a wink, and you unroll the scroll, flattening it across your desk. The script is jagged, hastily written, probably by a junior miner with more muscle than literacy. You squint at the numbers. Or wait? Uncertain. Transport cost? Vague. And, oh, wonderful, the tax estimate is rounded to the nearest 10 units. Not even close to standard. You sigh again, then begin the slow work of converting the mess into something intelligible. You cross-reference the mine's previous export rates. You consult the weather ledger to see if they had rain delays, those often lead to spoilage. You even pull a shipment map from last season to compare caravan routes. One of the junior scribes walks by, peeks in, and winces. New mines, he asks. New madness.
He nods with pity and scurries away. For the next hour, you are entirely consumed. Every line you rewrite must match 3 other logs. Every discrepancy must be explained. Every entry must be adjusted for either sand weight or goat nibbling. You pause only once, to stretch your back and rub your eyes. At some point, you find yourself humming. A stupid song, one your mother used to sing when counting sheep or debts or reasons not to marry into the leatherworking guild. The melody loops in your brain like an old abacus bead. Eventually, you finish. You write a red C on the corner, checked, cross-verified, calmed down, and place it in the outgoing tray. Just as you sit back, your assistant, Aminata, peeks in. There's a guest waiting for you, she says. In the second courtyard. Says he needs accounting advice. You groan quietly. Does he have a scroll? No. But he has a large hat. That narrows it down to either a merchant with something to hide or a poet with something to sell. You rise anyway. The second courtyard is smaller, quieter, cooled by the shadow of a fig tree and a running fountain where birds dunk themselves and flap indignantly. The guest is seated on a reed mat, fanning himself with a folded palm leaf. He rises when he sees you. Ah. Accountant, he says, grinning. I'm Idris, silversmith from the Eastern Quarter. My brother said you once recalculated the weight of his warehouse by just listening to the echo. You blink. That might have happened. I've a problem, Idris says. The magistrate says I underpaid on my silver dues. I say he misweighed my crucibles. You raise an eyebrow. Did you witness the weighing? I was washing my hands. Convenient. He shrugs, sheepish. I thought it would help cleanse the trade.
You sit beside him on the mat and request more detail. He provides numbers. Vague ones. You pull a wax tablet from your belt and begin scribbling. His weight claims don't match the usual burn rate. And if he really used charcoal from the southern forests, the yield should have been lower, not higher. Show me the crucibles, you say. He blinks. Now. Now. So you walk. Across the east wing, past 2 goat pens, a weaver's tent, and into the edge of the artisan quarter. His shop is tidy, the tools well worn. He produces 3 crucibles and a jar of silver shavings. You sniff them. You know that smell, real silver, slightly burned, bitter on the back of the throat. You knock the crucible's side. The echo tells you it was overfilled. Not under. You owe the tax, you say simply. He slumps. I was afraid you'd say that. Then why ask? Hope is cheaper than silver. You scribble a fine on his ledger and nod him off. He thanks you anyway, respect for the honest answer, if not the expensive one. On your way back to the palace, the afternoon wind kicks up. Sand dusts your sandals. You pause beneath the fig tree to rinse your hands and your face. The cold water brings a sharp kind of clarity. You are surrounded by people who lie, beg, bargain, and guess. And yet, somehow, you keep the empire from falling into arithmetic ruin. The sun's now leaning west. You have another scroll to complete. 2 payments to verify. 1 rumor to investigate. And a pigeon message to decode, one with 3 numbers and no context. Another normal afternoon. You return to your desk just as the sun begins to flatten, its light stretching long across the tiled floor, catching golden flecks in the ledgers and painting shadows behind every curve of your ink pot. The scrolls breathe dust. The heat has settled into the walls. A hush begins to fall over the palace, not silence, no, the palace never fully sleeps, but a kind of afternoon lull, the prelude to evening's tightening coils. You sit down, stretch your fingers, and unroll the next scroll. This one comes marked with a thin red ribbon, an indication that it concerns noble finances. The title is inked in precise strokes, Household Budget, Princess Amanota of the Red Wing. You rub your temples. Royal accounts are always delicate. Not because they're complicated, on the contrary, they're often full of blank spaces, but because mistakes could be mistaken for accusations. And accusations can get you reassigned to something terrible, like overseeing goat registration on the empire's southernmost border. The scroll begins with the usual expenses, robes, coal, flour paste, attendants' wages. Then it shifts to the creative entries. Sapphire-threaded sandal straps. Honey imported in ceramic jars shaped like birds. Dream interpretation services, paid in advance. You blink. That last one's new. A small note is scrawled beside it. Interpreter claims to read a fate imprints on sandal soles. You stare at it for a long moment, wondering if this is a prank. But no, there's the official wax seal, clear as day. Stamped approval from one of the Red Wing advisors. Historians still debate how seriously royal dream interpreters were taken. Some argue they were kept only for ritual, others say their predictions changed the course of gold taxes. You suspect both are true, depending on who was listening and whether or not they'd recently eaten. You start a new line on your ledger and begin calculating the monthly averages. She's nearly doubled her cent oil budget this quarter. Either she's expecting diplomatic guests, or she's hiding something. You write nothing down. Not your place. Your job is to make the numbers line up, not to guess why they wobble. A knock interrupts you, your assistant again, appearing with something in her hands. From the Sultan's steward, she says. Urgent. You take it. A sealed document wrapped in royal silk. It smells faintly of amber and ink. You unseal it carefully, eye scanning the page. It's a list. Provisional audit requests, priority items. Embassy donation logs from the last moon. Salt weight fluctuations from GAO. Discrepancy in gold tallies between Temple Ward and Market Wing. Recalculation of trade tithes on foreign wall. Reconciliation of pigeon dispatches from Scylla, translated. Your stomach sinks. This is 3 days of work in one sheet of parchment. And they've sent it near sunset. Of course they have. You roll your shoulders. You can start with the embassy donation logs, they'll be the quickest. Mostly ceremonial, carved daggers, dyed cloth, ceremonial chickens. The hardest part will be verifying whether the loot carved with 7 sacred birds was actually received. Last time, the sacred birds turned out to be geese. You pull the donation log and begin comparing it with the gift record signed by the Sultan's chief diplomat. The handwriting's different. You hold both documents to the light. The ink doesn't match. That's unsettling. Forgery? Mistake? You underline the conflicting line and attach a note. Ink mismatch, verify original scribe. You glance at the rest of the list. So many numbers. So many ways for things to go wrong. And always so little time. The palace drums sound softly, 3 beats. Not urgent. Not ceremonial. Just an end-of-day call to prayer and reflection. You exhale. You make one final note in the ledger, audit queue initiated, sunset. Then you lean back. Let your head rest against the wall. Let your eyes close for just a moment. The murmur of distant courtyards floats in. You think about the time you first learned to count not with numbers, but with seeds. Your grandmother would press them into the earth and whisper, even the silent things must be counted. Especially them. The scrolls rustle gently in the breeze. The palace exhales. And so do you. You return to your desk just as the sun begins to flatten, its light stretching long across the tiled floor, catching golden flecks in the ledgers and painting shadows behind every curve of your ink pot. The scrolls breathe dust. The heat has settled into the walls. A hush begins to fall over the palace, not silence, no, the palace never fully sleeps, but a kind of afternoon lull, the prelude to evening's tightening coils. You sit down, stretch your fingers, and unroll the next scroll. This one comes marked with a thin red ribbon, an indication that it concerns noble finances. The title is inked in precise strokes, Household Budget, Princess Amanota of the Red Wing. You rub your temples. Royal accounts are always delicate. Not because they're complicated, on the contrary, they are often full of blank spaces, but because mistakes could be mistaken for accusations. And accusations can get you reassigned to something terrible, like overseeing goat registration on the empire's southernmost border. The scroll begins with the usual expenses, robes, coal, flour paste, attendants' wages. Then it shifts to the creative entries. Sapphire-threaded sandal straps. Honey imported in ceramic jars shaped like birds. Dream interpretation services, paid in advance. You blink. That last one's new. A small note is scrawled beside it. Interpreter claims to read a fate imprints on sandal soles. You stare at it for a long moment, wondering if this is a prank. But no, there's the official wax seal, clear as day. Stamped approval from one of the Red Wing advisors. Historians still debate how seriously royal dream interpreters were taken. Some argue they were kept only for ritual, others say their predictions changed the course of gold taxes. You suspect both are true, depending on who was listening and whether or not they'd recently eaten.
You start a new line on your ledger and begin calculating the monthly averages. She's nearly doubled her cent oil budget this quarter. Either she's expecting diplomatic guests, or she's hiding something. You write nothing down. Not your place. Your job is to make the numbers line up, not to guess why they wobble. A knock interrupts you, your assistant again, peering with something in her hands. From the Sultan's steward, she says. Urgent. You take it. A sealed document wrapped in royal silk. It smells faintly of amber and ink. You unseal it carefully, eye scanning the page. It's a list. Provisional audit requests, priority items. Embassy donation logs from the last moon. Salt weight fluctuations from GAO. Discrepancy in gold tallies between Temple Ward and Market Wing. Recalculation of trade tithes on foreign wall. Reconciliation of pigeon dispatches from Scylla, translated. Your stomach sinks. This is 3 days of work in one sheet of parchment. And they've sent it near sunset. Of course they have. You roll your shoulders. You can start with the embassy donation logs, they'll be the quickest. Mostly ceremonial, carved daggers, dyed cloth, ceremonial chickens. The hardest part will be verifying whether the loot carved with 7 sacred birds was actually received. Last time, the sacred birds turned out to be geese. You pull the donation log and begin comparing it with the gift record signed by the Sultan's chief diplomat. The handwriting's different. You hold both documents to the light. The ink doesn't match. That's unsettling. Forgery? Mistake? You underline the conflicting line and attach a note. Ink mismatch, verify original scribe. You glance at the rest of the list. So many numbers. So many ways for things to go wrong. And always so little time. The palace drum sounds softly, 3 beats. Not urgent. Not ceremonial. Just an end-of-day call to prayer and reflection. You exhale.
You make one final note in the ledger, audit queue initiated, sunset. Then you lean back. Let your head rest against the wall. Let your eyes close for just a moment. The murmur of distant courtyards floats in. You think about the time you first learned to count not with numbers, but with seeds. Your grandmother would press them into the earth and whisper, even the silent things must be counted. Especially them. The scrolls rustle gently in the breeze. The palace exhales. And so do you. Darkness spreads across the palace like spilled ink. The final blush of daylight fades into muted blues and greys, and the soft clang of iron lanterns being lit echoes gently through the archways. From your narrow office window, you see flame-tipped shadows flicker along the eastern corridors, palace guards on rotation, carrying torches and yawns in equal measure. Inside, the air cools, slightly. Just enough to stir the scroll ends, make the wax candles gutter, and tempt you to pause. But there's still one more item on your desk. A pigeon message, small, tightly rolled, and bearing the faint smell of damp feathers. The string binding it is palace issue, dyed red at the tips to signal internal only. You untie it carefully and unroll the tiny square of parchment. It reads: Scylla trader reports missing shipment. No record in archives. Claims 5 units ivory, 2 bolts dyed linen, 1 silver idol. Denies smuggling. Audit needed. Merchant name, Kofi of the West Gate. You stare at the words. They are tiny. Messy. Written in haste, likely by a palace pigeon clerk halfway through dinner. Still, the implications are huge. Ivory shipments are monitored heavily, too valuable, too easily pocketed. Silver idols even more so. Religious artifacts are taxed, recorded, and if lost, heads roll. You lean back in your chair. Kofi. You know the name. A quiet man, always dressed slightly too simply for his declared wealth. You met him once at the East Pavilion. He'd brought indigo bundles wrapped in palm fronds. Claimed they were for the mosque roof restoration. You light a second candle, slowly. Wax drips like melted time. The flame gives the office an amber glow, softening the harsh edges of your ledgers, casting long fingers of shadow over the numbers. You reopen the most recent gate manifests and start scanning. The West Gate records are sparse. Oddly so. You run your finger down the trade entries: copper, dates, goats, cloth, salt, no ivory. But linen appears twice. The second entry is lighter, fewer bolts, less weight, no assigned merchant name. You frown. That could be anything: a clerical error, an oversight, or a deliberate vanishing act. You fetch the gate roster and examine the scribe signatures. One name repeats more often than it should: Boller. A junior clerk, known for his steady hand and slower mind. Historians still argue whether palace clerks were bribed frequently, or only often enough to keep things flexibly efficient. You lean toward the latter. People rarely bribe for sport, they bribe because someone upstream lets them. You tap the table once, twice, then retrieve your own small notebook, the one not stored in palace archives. You write: Scylla anomaly. Ivory missing. Possible dual entry linen disguise. Clerk, Boller. Cross-check Kofi trade entries versus pigeon logs. You close the notebook and lock it in your side drawer. You'll pursue it tomorrow. You rise, stretch, and gather your outer robe. It's nearly nightfall, and the marble walkways have taken on a sheen of reflected torchlight. The scent of oil lamps and slow-cooked lentils drifts in from the residential wing. Somewhere, someone is softly tuning a kora. The day, officially, is done. But unofficially? The palace never really sleeps. You walk the long corridor back toward your quarters. Your sandals tap rhythmically on the stone. Each step echoes slightly louder in the cooler air. As you pass the mosaic of the Great Sultan's court, the one with the exaggerated gold piles and mythical white elephants, you pause. Even here, in this grand fresco meant to intimidate visiting dignitaries, the eyes of the accountant are just slightly too tired. You imagine yourself in that mural, frowning at a misplaced dinar, while everyone else smiles for eternity. You chuckle to yourself. Maybe you'll carve a tiny tally mark into one of the wall tiles tomorrow. Your secret rebellion. Your chamber is small: 2 mats, a scroll shelf, and a low sleeping platform. But it is yours. You fold your robe, extinguish your lantern, and lay down. The night breathes through the palace like a slow wind through tall grass. You close your eyes and think about numbers not as burdens, but as breathing things. Quiet. Endlessly moving. Waiting to be seen. And for the first time in days, you sleep before the stars fade. The morning greets you not with birdsong, but with a rap on the wooden screen beside your bed. 3 short knocks. You blink into the dimness. The sun is barely up, just a pale smear behind the palace curtains. You sit up slowly, rubbing sleep from your eyes. The voice behind the screen is Amanota's. Calm. Efficient. There's a queue outside the archive already. 1 merchant, 2 scribes, and a guard from the armory. You sigh softly and rise. Your back cracks once, a reminder that sleep on a rush mat isn't sleep at all, it's just a polite collapse. You splash cold water on your face from the wash basin and wrap your robe tight against the chill. The first merchant waiting at the archive door smells like roasted nuts and tension. He holds a faded scroll and a basket of something he probably hopes counts as a bribe. You wave him off before he can offer it. The last time you accepted a gift, 3 boiled eggs and a slice of bread, the eggs turned out to be payment in lieu of tax. State your issue, you say, not unkindly. I paid 3 goat hides for the guild license, he says. They say I owe a 4th. You examine the scroll. The ink is faded, but the tally is clear. 3 hides. Who says you owe more? The guildmaster's cousin. He said the rules changed. You make a note. Until I see the rule in writing, it's 3 hides. The man bows with exaggerated gratitude and shuffles away. Next is a palace scribe. Young, blinking, carrying an armful of dried receipts. I need a re-ink, he says, dumping them on your table. You shake your head. That's not how this works. He winces. Please? Some were chewed by a mule. The rest just faded. You sigh and let him leave the stack for inspection. Then comes the guard. Helmet under one arm, a steel scroll in the other. He places it gently on your table like it's a sleeping child. We need an audit of spear production, he says. Says we ordered 500. We received 400. We now have 321. The captain's nervous. You raise an eyebrow. What happened to the missing 79? The guard clears his throat. We think termites. You pause. Steel termites. Wooden shafts, he mumbles. You suppress a laugh. Barely. Return before midday, you say. Bring a sample. He nods and leaves quickly. This is your morning, half mystery, half farce, entirely arithmetic. You work through the scrolls, your hand steady even as your mind drifts. You think about how strange it is that your empire, famed for its gold and wisdom, leans so precariously on little ledgers like these. If you lose track of goat hides and spear shafts and molasses jars, everything else, embassies, treaties, silken parades, starts to wobble. You make a small mistake on one of the receipts, an addition that skips a unit, and you catch it immediately. But the moment lingers. That's how it happens. One tired day. One uncounted item. Then someone 10 steps up the chain makes a decision based on your numbers, and suddenly, you're issuing royal apologies for non-existent saffron. You pause for a breath. Outside the window, the morning sun has finally cleared the eastern tower. The courtyard glows. You return to your scrolls and continue. One by one. Line by line. You verify the merchant's 3 goat hides. You check the scribe's faded receipts against the central record. You begin a new chart for army inventory loss, probable rot, unlikely theft, and mysterious battlefield misplacement, which is just the guard's way of saying, we left some behind. You're halfway through a line about imported dyes when you hear a low whistle outside the door. Aminata pokes her head in. There's someone here to see you. Says it's personal. That's rare. You rise and step outside. Standing there, under the shade of a fig tree, is your cousin from the outer provinces. You haven't seen him in 2 years. He smiles, sheepish. I heard you keep the empire from collapsing, he says. You gesture him into the archive. You heard wrong, you reply. I just delay the collapse by 1 scroll at a time. Your cousin settles awkwardly onto the bench across from your desk, his travel cloak dusted from the road, a dry crust of river mud clinging to the hem. He smells faintly of cinnamon and old goatskin, a familiar, comfortable scent from your childhood, when you'd both run barefoot around the courtyard in Kumbi Saleh, pretending to be caravan guards. Now, you balance royal ledgers and you're not sure yet. He sets a scroll pouch on the desk with a thud. I need help, he says. You gesture for him to continue. It's about inheritance. Our uncle, Malam Abdu, he passed in the spring. Left behind 3 camels, a disputed tract of land near the wells, and a lockbox of gold dinars. The problem is, the division. You nod slowly. Let me guess, everyone thinks they deserve more. He sighs. Exactly. His eldest son claims the camels. The widow says he promised her the land. And the gold, well, Two cousins claim they buried it together during the raids and should split it, even though no one has dug it up yet. You rub your temple. Historians still debate whether 14th century inheritance in the Sahel was guided more by Islamic legal precedent or sheer volume of shouting. You murmur. He grins. I'm leaning toward the shouting. You open a blank ledger sheet, draw 3 dividing lines, and begin asking questions. Names. Dates. What was promised in words, and what was written in ink? By the time the sun climbs to its peak, you've turned family drama into rough columns of property claims. You reach for your oldest wax stamp, the one your grandmother gave you when you were both boys, and press it onto the temporary deed page. There, you say, handing him the record. Tell them it's not final until the Sultan's court signs it. But this will calm the fire. He folds it slowly. You've changed, he says. You arch a brow. You used to solve things with shouting. You smile, small and tired. Now I solve them with decimals. The Festival of Measures is a beloved palace tradition, an entire week dedicated to weighing, measuring, and showing off the empire's precision. It's a nightmare for accountants. Every unit of gold, grain, cloth, and salt must be recounted. Publicly. You dig out the ceremonial tally books and begin planning your strategy. As you ink the first line, your candle flickers. The ink settles. And you begin, again. You begin your preparation for the Festival of Measures with a sigh that seems to echo off the scrolls. The ceremonial ledgers are heavier than usual, thicker parchment, woven with threads of indigo, their borders marked in gold leaf. They are designed to impress visiting dignitaries, not withstand daily use. Even the ink bottle used for festival entries is different, rosewater infused, so every page smells like a gift no one asked for. The first task, recalculate the palace's storehouse inventory. You call for a junior scribe and send him ahead to the southern vault, where they keep the salt bricks and grain. You follow slowly, taking the shaded walkways, letting your fingers trail along sun-warmed stone. The air grows cooler as you descend into the vault. It always smells like old jute and damp rock here. Salt sweats in neat stacks along the far wall. Sacks of millet rest in piles beside broken scales that haven't been repaired in years. The vault keeper, an old man named Yero, greets you with a nod. His face is creased like cracked leather, and his hands are always coated in flour dust, no matter the hour. We lost 2 sacks to spoilage, he says before you ask. The weevil kind. Got into the seams. You make a note. Spoilage is expected. Documented. Forgiven. What about the salt? He hesitates. We were short last week. Trade caravan from Wallata came under bandit attack. 3 bricks went missing. You raise a brow. And the bandits took salt. He nods. It's lighter than gold. Easier to carry. Fetches good coin in the desert. You sigh, jot the loss in red ink, and begin weighing the rest. The process takes over an hour. Every sack. Every brick. You write the totals on the ceremonial ledger, your handwriting clean, even, and increasingly stiff as the hours tick past. By the time you emerge, the sun has shifted. The vault shadows stretch long and thin, like fingers reaching to remind you that the day is far from done. You pause briefly in the shade of a lemon tree near the scribe's quarter. The smell of its blossoms is sharp and clean, a contrast to the sour grain rot still clinging to your robe. You wipe your hands, straighten your ledger, and continue. The next stop is the garment wing. The Festival of Measures requires a count of palace fabrics, every bolt, every dyed cloth, every ceremonial sash. You dread this part. The textile clerks are notoriously possessive. They guard their cloth like it's spun from personal secrets. You arrive to find the head clothier, Naima, waiting with a frown. She's draped in crimson silk and holding a thread counter shaped like a seashell. "We already did our count last moon," she says. "And now we do it again," you reply gently. She rolls her eyes, but gestures you in. The storeroom is a riot of color. Indigo, saffron, ochre, white, stacked in careful bundles, wrapped in protective palm fronds. You open one bolt, pinch the fabric, count the threads. Naima watches you with mild horror. "You're flattening the pleats," she whispers. "I'll note the damage in the inventory," you murmur back. You work in silence. Tallying. Measuring. Documenting. You note a missing bolt, one marked as wedding weave, pure cotton, vanished since the last audit. "Was it used?" you ask. Naima hesitates. "I might have taken it," she says. "For a cousin's ceremony. I meant to replace it." You exhale. "This again." You write it down. Not as theft. As advanced ceremonial usage. Because sometimes the easiest way to keep the empire together is to rename the chaos. The sun begins to set as you make your way back toward the archive wing. Your legs ache. Your fingers are stained with 6 different inks. The ceremonial ledger is heavier now, its pages thick with loss, adjustment, compromise, and quiet forgiving. You pass a group of children chasing each other with paper fans shaped like scrolls. They giggle as they run. One of them crashes into your leg, bounces off, and keeps going. You watch them disappear down the corridor. Then you climb the stairs to your office. You light the last candle. And you begin adding the day's total. Salt, -3 bricks, bandits. Millet, -2 sacks, weevils. Cloth, -1 bolt, ceremonial exception. And yet, somehow, it all balances. For now. The candle crackles as you lift your pen for the final notation of the day. The flame flickers, casting uneven shadows across the far wall, where your ledger shelf leans slightly under its own weight. The ceremonial tally for the Festival of Measures is not yet complete, but it has begun to take form, lines curling neatly like irrigation ditches across parchment, guiding the empire's excesses into comprehensible channels. You blow gently on the ink to dry it, then close the ledger with care. The cover is warm from your touch, faintly fragrant with rosewater. For a long moment, you simply rest your hand on the surface. This book will be paraded through the courtyard, lifted like scripture in front of nobles, foreign emissaries, and the Sultan himself. Everyone will nod solemnly at numbers they do not fully understand. And you will stand a step behind, forgotten, fingers stained, but, hopefully, unquestioned. You allow yourself the smallest smile. A soft knock on your door breaks the silence. It's Aminata again, holding a slip of folded paper. Her face is unreadable. "A private note," she says. "It was delivered by a child." You accept it and unfold the paper. The message is brief, scrawled in shaky ink. They're hiding the second shipment. No name. No signature. Just a location scribbled at the bottom, outer storehouse, western wall. You blink. There is no official second shipment logged in any of the palace ledgers. You read the note again. This could be a joke. Or a trap. Or it could be something far more tedious, a warehouse error that no one wants to own. You grab your light travel robe and tuck the note into your belt. Aminata watches you, saying nothing, but the concern in her eyes says enough. The western wall is a long walk, especially under moonlight. You pass silent fig trees and empty fountains, torches guttering in the wind. A dog barks once in the distance, then nothing. At last, you reach the outer storehouse, a squat, windowless building with a faded sun symbol painted above the door. You knock twice, wait, then push gently. It's not locked. Inside, it's dark, musty. The air smells like straw, rust, and dried dung. You light a small oil lamp and scan the room. Crates are stacked in neat rows. Most are labeled grains, spices, tools. But one stack in the far corner bears no markings. You move closer. The top crate is ajar. Inside, bolts of foreign cloth, unmistakably fine. Dyed in hues the palace hasn't officially imported in over a season. You pry open the next crate. Silver ornaments. Temple style. Worth a scribe's annual wages. You lean back. This is the missing shipment. Or rather, the unlogged shipment. Smuggled? Misplaced? Hoarded for later distribution? Hard to say. Historians still argue whether these kinds of discrepancies were systemic or simply tolerated. You suspect both. After all, this empire runs not just on grain and gold, but on silence, favors, and forgetting. You blow out the lamp. This isn't a scroll you can fix with ink alone. You step outside into the cool night. The moon is nearly full, casting pale light over the courtyard flagstones. You hear the distant hum of music, some noble's private gathering in one of the inner halls. You turn back to the storehouse and, after a moment's hesitation, push the door closed. You'll log it tomorrow. Or not. You'll decide after you sleep. Because some problems require rest before arithmetic. The next morning arrives as it always does, with the shrill call of the courtyard horn, echoing off stone walls and waking birds before it wakes men. You rise slowly, your joints complaining, your mind still wrapped in the cloth of dreams. The storehouse discovery from last night lingers like dust in the lungs. You haven't decided what to do with it yet. Maybe you won't. You dress without ceremony. Your robe, once a deep maroon, is now faded and softened by time and use. You carry the quiet air of someone who has seen too much inventory to believe in perfection anymore. Your first appointment is with the festival stewards. They are gathered in the outer hall, their robes immaculate, their ledgers untouched. You recognize a few, men who only seem to appear when banners go up and drums begin to play. One of them, a man with a waxed mustache and far too much perfume, greets you with a shallow nod. Master Accountant, he says, we are nearly ready for the display. We simply need the final grain tallies, and of course, confirmation that the Sultan's personal vault reflects, he pauses, as if tasting the phrase, reflects, abundance. You nod. The vault is fine. He smiles. Good. The illusion of surplus is the key to faith. He meant it as a joke. Maybe. You hand him a folded summary page. He accepts it like a priest receiving scripture, and you leave him to his theatrical duties. You prefer numbers to drama. Back in your office, you begin verifying the ledgers that will be publicly displayed during the festival. Each has to be perfect, not in truth, but in harmony. The palace doesn't mind loss. It minds chaos. Salt down 3 bricks. Fine. But salt down 3 bricks and a cloth bolt and a crate of brass. Now there's suspicion. And suspicion is what your ink must always avoid. You run your hands over each scroll, smoothing them, checking for creases, smudges, or errors. Your assistant arrives with warm bread and a cup of watered honey. You thank her without looking up. The page in front of you bears a mistake. The page is dated 1 moon early. A small thing, but enough to raise questions. You scrape it clean with your knife. The parchment curls faintly under the blade. You re-ink the correct moon. Done. One less whisper waiting to be spoken. You think again of the hidden shipment in the storehouse. You haven't logged it. You haven't told anyone. You've done nothing. And maybe that's the most powerful act available to someone in your position. Historians still argue whether empires rot from corruption or calcify from obedience. You suspect the difference is mostly a matter of timing. You light a new candle. The flame jumps. Outside, you hear the palace children rehearsing a procession. Their voices rise and fall in rhythmic chant, grain for gold, salt for song, numbers right and never wrong. You smile faintly. You decide, for now, to say nothing. Because the shipment won't vanish, but the memory of it might. And sometimes, survival depends on which facts are recorded, and which are left in the dark, gently folded like spare cloth and sealed behind a quiet door. By mid-morning, the palace stirs like a hive before the honey harvest. Couriers dart between chambers, robes flapping, scrolls flailing. Musicians begin to warm their strings in the upper courtyards. The slow clang of festival gongs reverberates through the palace stone. You hear it from your window, deep, deliberate strikes meant not just to announce, but to lull. The Festival of Measures isn't about spectacle. It's about confidence. The kind of confidence that only perfect numbers can sell. You gather the official scrolls into a carved wooden case. The lid bears the seal of the Grand Treasurer, a mark pressed into the lacquer so many times it has begun to splinter. You fasten the leather strap around the case, secure it to your side, and make the slow walk toward the ceremonial hall. The corridor is wide and bright, flanked by glass tiles imported from the north. They cast slanted rainbows on the floor as you pass. You walk alone. Not out of prestige, but because few wish to be caught standing next to the person who holds the truth behind the numbers. At the end of the corridor, the ceremonial dais gleams, freshly polished, flanked by draped fabrics of indigo and gold. The audience is already assembling, nobles in embroidered sashes, scholars with ink on their cuffs, foreign guests with veiled faces and sharp eyes. Even the Sultan is present, seated beneath a canopy of dyed ostrich feathers. You bow, step forward, and kneel at the scroll stand. You unfasten the ledger and place it gently on the stand's flat top. Then you begin. Not with words, but with gestures. You unroll the scroll just enough for the first columns to show salt, cloth, millet, incense, candles. The palace scribe reads each aloud, intoning the values with a trained lilt. Salt, 12,000 bricks. Grain, 46,000 sacks. Indigo, 11 bolts added, 1 reassigned. Cloth. And so on. The crowd murmurs, nods, occasionally claps. They don't care about the figures. They care that the numbers exist. That someone counted them. That the empire, for all its dust and death and hunger, still adds up. Historians debate whether ceremonies like this were more about governance or theater. You know the answer, they were about reassurance. A public lullaby, sung in digits. When the final line is read, the scribe seals the scroll. You bow again and withdraw. There is no applause. Just a return to music, food, and idle gossip about how warm the Sultan looked in his new sapphire robe. You're free for the day, technically. But you walk slowly back toward the archive wing anyway. Not out of duty, out of inertia. You pass a servant trimming fig branches. A clerk chasing wind-blown papers. A foreign merchant laughing too loudly over wine. And then you stop. At the base of the western wall, where the unlogged shipment still sleeps behind a door no one else has checked. You don't go in. You simply pause. Rest your hand against the stone. And breathe. You return to your office, hang up your robe, and sit. Outside, festival drums begin again. Louder now. Joyful. Inside, your candle flickers. and you make a single notation on an otherwise empty page. Storehouse contents align with palace confidence. It means nothing and everything. Evening settles like parchment pressed flat, soft, wide, and still. The palace quiets not in silence, but in slower rhythms. The festival drums have faded into memory, replaced by the distant clink of banquet plates and the tired laughter of overfed nobles. You sit alone now, back in your office, your ledger closed, the seal of the treasury cooling in its brass case. There's nothing urgent left to do. Not tonight. You lean back on the woven mat, fingers still stained faintly from ink and wax. The wall beside you bears the small, almost invisible tally marks you've etched there over the years, a private count of quiet victories, audits resolved, discrepancies explained, bribes refused, truths recorded. No one will ever see them but you. And that's enough. The wind shifts through the open screen, bringing with it the scent of charcoal and citrus, the comforting aroma of grilled yam from the servants' courtyard. You remember, faintly, how you once wanted to be a trader like your uncle, roaming between cities, bartering salt for stories. But instead, you stayed. You chose stillness. Columns over caravans. Order over wonder. And yet, your mind drifts back to the crates. The hidden shipment. The whisper on the note. It would be easy to report it now. To log it properly. To trace it to its origin and let the system grind forward like it always does. But tonight, as the empire hums gently around you, you decide, again, not to. Not out of fear. Out of timing. Sometimes the empire needs truth. Other times, it needs rest. You blow out your candle. In the fading warmth of your office, you lie back on the mat and stretch your legs. The stars outside blink awake, one by one, like quiet answers to questions you never quite asked. The palace breathes. The ledgers sleep. And so do you. And now, beneath the soft hush of moonlight and the whisper of ink dried on parchment, your breathing begins to slow. You've walked long halls. You've carried numbers like burdens and decisions like quiet weights tucked beneath your robe. You've bent to the empire's rhythms and still held your spine straight beneath the scrolls. You did your part. And now, it is enough. The palace fades behind a veil of dreams, its gold softened, its stone warmed. The marble is no longer cold beneath your feet but dusted with sun, like soft sand at the river's edge. The ledgers close themselves. The quills rest. The walls no longer whisper of secrets, but hum a lullaby, measured in candlelight and breath. Let the crates remain closed. Let the scrolls wait. Let the empire spin gently on, with or without you counting each grain. For now, your task is simpler. Just breathe. Let the weight slip from your shoulders. Let the silence wrap around you like woven cloth. You are still. You are safe. And the numbers, for once, can count themselves.